In this video, we're going to go over your Chapter 10 homework, problem number 12. Problem number 12 is very similar to problem number 11, except that we're going to use the weighted average cost of capital for all of our debt instead of looking at the construction loan. So in this one, before I do anything, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the weighted average cost of capital. So what I'm going to do is, for each one of the loans, I'm going to take a look at the principal amount. I'm going to look at the interest rate. And I'm going to calculate the total interest. So I have three loans, a $3 million construction loan at a rate of 11%. I have a $4.2 million long-term loan, and that one is at 6%. And then finally, I have a $6.2 million loan, and that has a rate of 8%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each principal and multiply it by the rate, because in the problem all of these loans are outstanding all of 2024 and all of 2025. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the total principal and the total interest. So in total this year, we borrowed $13,400,000. Total interest, $1,078,000. So our weighted average cost of capital is just going to be $1,078,000, the interest, divided by the total principal, $13,400,000. So to calculate that, I'm just going to take the $1,078,000. I'm going to divide by the $13,400,000, and we're going to assume that all of our interest is at a rate of 8.04%. So we're told to round the weighted average rate of all debt to 2 decimal places, but do not round other intermediate calculations. Enter your answers in dollars rounded to the nearest whole number. So if I'm going to do the weighted average of all debt to 2 decimal places, I'll put it in percent. To 2 decimal places, that will be 8.04%. So now that we've got that, the first step we're going to do is we're going to calculate the weighted average expenditures for 2024. So to calculate the weighted average expenditures for 2024, we're just going to use these 4 numbers. So just like I did in the last problem, I'm going to take each date. I'm going to put in the amount. I'm going to put in the fraction. I'm going to put in the weight. And I'm going to multiply the amount times the fraction to get the weight. So just like we did in the last problem, on January 1st, let me note that this is for 2024. So on January 1st, I spent $1,200,000. And once again, we want to find how many months it is from January 1st to December 31st. That is 12 months. So we're going to use a fraction of 12 over 12. Remember, 2024 is an entire year. Then we have March 1st, our second expenditure, $660,000. So we're going to count the number of months from March 1st to December 31st. We've done this a bunch of times. That gets a fraction of 10 over 12. Third expenditure that we have June 30th. That amount is $520,000. I have to count the number of months from June 30th to December 31st. That looks like 6 months, so that is going to get a fraction of 6/12. And finally, October 1st, we're going to expend $620,000. We count the number of months from October 1st to December 31st. October, November, December is 3 months, so we're going to use a fraction of 3/12. So remember, these are not numbers, I just displayed the fraction to use. So first I'm going to take $1,200,000 and multiply it by 12/12. And of course I'm multiplying it by 1, so I'm going to get $1.2 million. The second number, I'm going to take $660,000 and multiply that by 10/12, and I get $550,000. I'm going to take $520,000, multiply it by 6/12, which is 1/2, so I'm going to get $260,000. And finally, $620,000 multiplied by 3 divided by 12 gives me $155,000. So I'm going to add up to get the total expenditures, and I'm going to add up to get the weighted average. So my total expenditures, sum of all of those numbers, $3 million. Weighted average expenditures, add all of the weights. I think I was in the wrong cell. Let's start again. Weighted average expenditures, add all of them up, and we've got $2,165,000. Now, our total interest per year, $1,078,000, weighted average cost of capital, 8.04%. So in this case, we're not going to compare it to the total interest expense. We're not going to care about the construction loan. The entire weighted average is going to be at the weighted average cost of capital, and 2024 is a full year. So our interest, potentially capitalizable, is just going to be $2,165,000, the weighted average expenditures, multiplied by our weighted average cost of capital, 8.04%. So I'm going to take $2,165,000, multiply that by 8.04%, and I am going to get interest potentially capitalizable, of 174,066. Since this is less than the total interest paid per year, when we calculated the weighted average cost of capital, so because the capitalized interest is less than the total interest paid, we're able to capitalize it, and it goes from interest potentially capitalizable to interest capitalized. So we have our total interest paid up in the weighted average cost of capital. So for the first year, our interest expense is just going to be the total interest paid. Subtract out the interest capitalized. So my interest expense will be $1,078,000. Subtract 174,066. And we get 903,934. So my interest capitalized 174,066, and my interest expense 903,934. Now let's work on to 2025, so a little bit easier, just a tad. It's still difficult, but it's a little bit easier. So let's move on to 2025. So once again, in 2025, we're going to need a couple of numbers. We're going to need our total expenditures in 2024. We're going to need our interest capitalized in 2024. So what I will do is I will put those two in yellow, so we know what we're looking at. And then one more thing that we have to remember is that year 2 is only 9 months. So in our calculation of the weighted average expenditures, we're going to divide by 9 instead of by 12. And then when we multiply by the 8.04%, because that's annual, we'll have to multiply that by 9/12. So let's get going and let us finish this problem. So now for the weighted average expenditures for 2025. We're going to do the same thing that we did up above, but we're going to start off on January 1st with the first two numbers that I have in yellow, 3,174,066, and just assume that they are expended on January 1st. Once we go through that, we will look at all of the other amounts expended in 2025. I'm going to do the same thing that I did up above. I have my date, I have my amount, I have my fraction, and I have my weight. So the first one we're going to start off with is the expenditures from 2024. So on January 1st, our amount is going to be not the weighted average expenditures, the total expenditures of $3 million. Now, because our building was completed on September 30th, we're going to count the number of months from January 1st to September 30th. That is going to be 9 months, so that is going to get a fraction of 9/9. Again, we're dividing by 9 because our second year is only 9 months. Then our second expenditure on January 1st is the capitalized interest. We know the number is correct, 174,066. So since that was spent on January 1st, we count the months from January 1st to September 30th. And that, just like before, is 9/9. Then we move on to our final three expenditures. January 31st, we spent $360,000. We count the number of months from January 31st to September 30th. That one looks like it's going to be 8 months, so that one will get a fraction of 8/9. Next, we're going to look at April 30th. April 30th, the amount was April 30th, not ARP 30th, $675,000. We count the number of months from April 30th to September 30th, May, June, July, August, September. That one looks like it is going to get a fraction of 5/9. And finally, our last expenditure, August 31st. The amount is $1,080,000. We count the number of months from August 31st to September 30th. That looks like it's 1 month. That is going to get a fraction of 1/9. So once again, I just do the multiplications, and remember, these are just for display purposes, just to know what you're multiplying by. I cannot use those cells because they're not numbers. So I'm going to take 3 million and multiply it by 9/9. Then I'm going to take 174066 and multiply it by 9 over 9. I'm going to take $360,000 and multiply that by 8 over 9. I am going to take $675,000 and multiply it by 5 over 9. And then finally, $1,080,000 multiplied by 1 over 9, or I could just divide by 9, and I'm going to get $120,000. So just like I did before, I'm going to add up the total expenditures, and I'm going to add up the total weighted average. So my total expenditures for 2025, let's put an underline so we can figure out that that's a grand total. Total expenditures for 2025, $5,289,066. Weighted average expenditures, $3,989,066. So the next step in the problem is to calculate the interest potentially capitalizable, and I'm going to take the weighted average expenditures, and I'm going to multiply it by the weighted average cost of capital. Now remember, because year 2 is 9 months, the 8.04% is annualized, so I'm also going to have to multiply that by 9 over 12, only for the second year, once again, because it was completed on September 30th, so we can only capitalize interest to September 30th. So I'm going to take 3,989,066. I'm going to multiply that by 8.04%, rounded to 2 decimals, and then I am going to multiply that by 9 over 12. So if I do that, if I take the weighted average expenditures, multiply that by 8.04%, and then multiply that by 9 over 12, I am going to get interest potentially capitalizable of 240,541. So we'll just round that to the nearest whole dollar. 240,541, and then we compare it to our total interest expense. So our total interest expense is over $1 million. So since 240,000 is less than $1 million, that goes from interest potentially capitalizable to interest capitalized. Now we do exactly the same thing that we did before. We're going to calculate our interest expense as the total interest paid, subtract out the interest capitalized. So my total interest paid, we calculated at the beginning. We calculated the weighted average cost of capital, $1,078,000. Subtract out the interest capitalized, 240,541. And that equals 837,459. So let's put in our numbers for 2005, and then let us finish this problem. So I have calculated that for 2025, my interest capitalized is 240,541, and my interest expense, 837,459. So now we just move on to requirement 2. So in requirement 2, we need to calculate the total cost of the building. So to calculate the total cost of the building, the easiest way, because our expenditures include the 2 here that came from the previous year, the easiest way to calculate it would be just to add all of these numbers, because these are all of the expenditures, and then we're just going to add the interest capitalized in 2024 and 2025. So since we know those numbers are all correct, we know that we're going to be correct with our sum. So I'm just going to add all of those numbers. So I have 1,200,000, I have 660,000, I have $520,000, I have $620,000, $360,000, $675,000, $1,080,000. So I've copied down all of those numbers, and then I have my 2 interest capitalized, 174,066 and 240,541. And we know that those numbers are correct. We got them correct in the first part. So all of those added together, all the expenditures plus the interest capitalized over the 2 years, is going to be the cost of the building, $5,529,607. The answer is complete and correct, and we have now done problems number 11 and 12.